I do love it though when a mag or person says, "I've been buying your prints for years. I have tattoos of your work on my body. I have your books and stuff. I'm shocked at your politics," and I love that. Yeah, it's like, well, you got to live with me now if I'm on your skin. Literally live with me.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives of living life on your own terms. Life lessons that keep us grounded, insane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Creative Asylum. My name is Daniel House, and today's guest is one of my personal favorite artists from Toronto, Canada. His name is Gary Taxali. He's an Indian artist who's lived in Canada pretty much his entire life. I first became aware of his work when I saw a show some 30, maybe even more than 30 years ago at the Rock LaRue Gallery in Seattle. I actually bought an original piece, which you'll see if you're watching this interview on YouTube. His work is really playful and fun and harkens back to Depression-era cartoons and animation, but at the same time, he has a style that's completely all his own. Starting in 2016 and the beginning of what I would refer to as the horror of the Trump regime, he started doing a whole series of political illustrations, which to me are some of the most powerful and concise statements on the state of American politics as it's been in the last 10 years or so. We talk a bit about that. We talk about a whole lot of stuff. If you're watching YouTube, there'll be a whole lot of work that will be integrated. Otherwise, you can listen. It's still an interesting conversation. Here you go, Gary Taxali. All right, Gary Taxali, hello, and thank you for coming to the Creative Asylum. It's very much appreciated.
Hello, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a fan of yours since I first saw your work at Rock LaRue Gallery in Seattle. I want to say maybe 30 years ago. I'm not sure of the exact time, but I bought an original piece. It was one of the pieces that you were doing on book covers. I don't know when you first started doing that, but I brought it along so you can see it.
Oh, wow. Okay, you have that.
Yes.
Oh, that.
I love that piece.
I mean, like all artists, I've made lots of work in my career.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do slideshows, I always show that piece.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's just evidence that I have good taste, right?
Yeah, that's right.
No, that show is wonderful, and I just loved all the work in it. And I'm like, I need one of these, and I think that's the one I want because What first inspired you to use book covers as a medium to paint on? Because I've actually never seen that before, and I've never seen it since. And I think it's such a cool idea.
I found a bunch of textbooks in my parents' basement from India, and they were like math and science books, and they were beautifully aged, and they had gorgeous typography.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also around the time I was kind of getting sick of my work, and I wanted to try and shake things up. And one of the things I wanted to do was to challenge myself by making work without any preconceived notions about where it was going. And that entailed using no material that could be removed, like a pencil or anything like that. So it was like a one-shot deal. And so I took these old textbooks and the covers and the pages, and I just started drawing on them. And because the surface is so beautiful, I almost felt like the art was pretty much done. I was just kind of slightly enhancing it with a
Interesting.
little with a little character too. It was already beautiful as it is, and that forced me to kind of work in a very kind of minimal way. And it did pretty good for me, so I started scouring, antique stores,
Right?
and a lot of the times people would just give me books because nobody wanted to buy a physics textbook from 1963,
Sure.
or it's out of date. But I saw the beauty, in these books.
Mhm.
One antique store would, they would regularly burn these books, and so I would just go to their backyard and rescue them, and give them a new life.
Do you still do that from time to time?
All the time.
Do you?
Whenever I travel, I go to old bookstores, and then people will direct me to a bookstore and say, "Oh, the you want some old books? Here's a lovely first
Right.
edition of." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I'm not. I'm interested in the stuff that nobody
I want
wants."
the stuff you're getting ready to burn.
That's right.
That's cool. So, you said your parents are from India. Are you from India too, or were you born in Canada?
I'm from India. Also, I was a year old
Okay.
when we moved to Canada.
So you have no childhood memories, obviously, of living in India.
None.
I guess when do you the obvious question, when do you first get interested in doing art? When I see your work, there's such a cool familiarity to it in a sense, in that you're drawing from, well, at least what I get is kind of old 20s and 30s cartoon work and maybe advertising work, but it feels like old early days of like pre-Second World War kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that stuff. When I was a little kid, my father would drop my sister and I off at the library. I'll be back in a couple of hours. Do some reading, read some books, and
Uh-huh.
I would always go to the cartoon section, and I found this volume of the collection of the Fleischer Brothers,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
just poured through it. And my dad saw that I loved this so much. I, had malaria and I was, in a hospital for, like, a couple of months.
Mm.
Went to India on a trip, got bit by a mosquito, and so he felt sorry for me, so he would buy me the Mad Magazine paperback collections from the gift shop, and so I was stuck alone in this hospital room, and I just got lost into the world of Bill Elder, and to this day, that is one of the reasons why I'll do, works, paintings or even mixed media pieces where I'll have a lot of stuff in there because, that's something that Bill would do a lot. A lot of components, a lot of characters, a lot
Mhm.
of density to it, and I found freedom in that because I thought, well, maybe the sum will be perceived as greater than the parts,
Huh.
so I could just kind of, like, try stuff, and it made me sort of experiment with different types of characters. But yeah, definitely the Depression era stuff, really stuck with me, the animations.
Mhm.
And then when I went to art school, learned about screen printing, it just felt like a natural progression to take this kind of work in a very lo-fi way, because it works with that sort of aesthetic and it worked out pretty good.
How old were you? Was that, like, post-high school? Like, how old were you when you went to art school?
When I went to, art school, I guess it was like 4 years, maybe I was, like, probably 18 when I started, but I learned about screen printing in high school,
Right.
but it wasn't really until after art school that I sort of found my direction. Art school was 4 years of experimentation, trying different styles, um, and like a lot of, emerging young artists, being, a little bit too influenced by, others, and
Uh-huh.
so I went through phases where I was looking too much rather than looking in, and it wasn't until I left art school that I started getting back to kind of what I really loved to, as a kid.
Which is sort of the comic influence stuff?
Exactly, yeah.
So you had already been doing that, well, but I guess it sounds like most of your life. You've had some kind of drawing utensil on some kind of surface doing
Yeah.
stuff. Maybe it was before art school, maybe it was after, but at what point in your life did you make the concrete decision that I want to be a full-time professional artist?
Pretty early on,
Mhm.
and I was super lucky because my father supported it. My
Mhm.
father would drive me to community, centers, to take it like extracurricular courses in drawing and painting
Nice.
outside of school. He was a bit of a hobbyist too, so he was excited that I wanted to be an artist, and so he would kind of teach me basic principles about mixing paint and things like
Okay.
that. My mother, who's a non-artist, she's just unconditionally supportive. Like, when I got accepted into art school, she came down to my high school and gave me the letter and was, like, crying with happiness. My sister is my lawyer and agent, also a big supporter. So I got super lucky with 3 amazing people that were
Yeah.
always in my, corner.
You hear so many stories of people who, their art or their creative self is sort of they're the rebel of the family, and it's just I've never understood that, like if your kid has a passion, you should encourage that even if I'm sorry you're not going to school and becoming an engineer, but you're doing something you love. Why would you not support that?
Exactly. And my father insisted that if I do this art thing, because you've picked this thing, now you have to work hard at it. I mean, obviously, I already worked hard at it because I, draw every day, but he was telling me the practical side of things, do what you can to make this happen for you and figure out a
Mhm.
way to make a living at it,
Yeah.
and I'll support you. And he did. And so after art school, I started taking my portfolio around
Mhm.
to agencies and publishing companies in Toronto. And I got a really cool assignment doing a billboard for Levi's.
Wow.
And yeah, it was like this really monster billboard. And so my parents went down to to that street corner, and my dad took a little videotape of it, and he was like really emotional about it.
I love that.
Yeah, it was really sweet. And I used that money and moved to New York City.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so, right after art school, I got an apartment on Park Avenue between 20 and 21st near Gramercy,
Mhm. Mhm.
started taking my portfolio around, and that's when my world was just absolutely exploded. And I met so many amazing people. I met these artists in the East Village who invited me to show with them, and they sort of took me under their wing. They would give me pizza and beer and sort of, treated me like a little younger brother. So I had this amazing support mechanism of just these wonderful human beings, including this guy, Tom Corn, who looked like, these amazing dreads that looked like this Rastafarian guy, and he was close friends with Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Wow.
So
Okay.
he would curate these really cool East Village shows. And so I just got thrust into the epicenter of that kind of happening because of this lovely man.
Was that where you first got to show? Was it in New York or was it prior to that?
That's where I first got to show. There was a group show Tom curated at the 450 Broadway Gallery in Soho. And it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. I didn't sell anything, but that didn't matter. I was showing with these wonderful artists, and I just kinda kept continuing. So, before that, I saw myself as just a mere illustrator,
Right.
and that world kind of took me into experimenting more with my work, which made me a better illustrator.
So when you left art school, how were you thinking of like yourself? Were you thinking of yourself in terms of an illustrator or an artist, or were you thinking sort of broad scale in that way? Because I know you've had an immense amount of success doing a lot of, fairly high end professional work as an illustrator. But when I look at your work, I always think of you as an artist, but you're both.
I think illustrators are artists,
Hmm.
but to answer your
Hmm.
question,
Yeah.
I didn't think about galleries at all.
Okay.
It wasn't until I met Tom and these 2 twin brothers from Oklahoma, Matt and Mark Enger, who look like bikers and were into screen printing, so they kind of brought me back into that in New York City. They just amazing guys, and so, Tom asked me to be in the show, and I said, I'm not an artist, I'm an illustrator." And then
Okay.
Tom said, "You're an artist." And so he kinda kicked me in the butt, and then all of a sudden, I was alone in the sense that I had to make pictures without being tethered to a story or an article,
Uh-huh.
and just kind of work with my own creativity,
Right.
and I loved it so much. In fact, working for gallery shows kinda gave me the confidence and creative autonomy to express that same creative control with my
Hmm.
clients,
Hmm.
and it worked out.
And what was it also in New York that you started getting a lot of commercial opportunities as well as an illustrator?
Not a lot, enough that I didn't become homeless, although there were a few times where I did go to some squats on 13th Street to eat because I had no money for food.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until a year later, my father passed away, so I moved back to
Right.
Toronto, and it was then that I found the old books, uh, and and when I started promoting my illustration through the old books and the papers and that, kind of style, um, that's when I went from doing illustrations for trade publications to Esquire, The New Yorker, Rolling
Hmm.
Stone, so I got a more prominent audience because of that kind of, shift in my style.
But it started with the books before you really had that, I don't know what to call it, that ascent?
It was the books that sort of did it for me.
That's interesting.
While I yeah, it was sort of, all I was doing was just straight painting,
Okay.
and, they were kind of like these little elfin-looking characters inspired by probably one of the, most famous illustrators of all time named Brad Holland,
Mhm.
and he was a New York City illustrator, and he became a friend, but I was looking too much at his style. And it wasn't until I moved back to Toronto and did the book cover thing, I started doing the older kind of pop arty kind of cartoon stuff.
So the books, the piece that I bought was kind of an example of the kind of art that really kicked your career into high gear, which is fascinating to me because it just doesn't sound like that was even an intention or an expectation. It was just sort of a take a left and see what's over there, and all of a sudden that was the thing that ignited everything. Past the Levi's billboard, what was the first big job you got as an illustrator from the book covers?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't remember, but it may have been for Esquire,
Mhm.
a full page illustration. The article was called What It Feels Like. And the creative director just said, just do your thing. Like, we love your idea so much. So I drew this character and, I probably wouldn't get away with it now, but the character was, like, doing different things like, he had an axe and there was a chicken on his stump, and
Mhm.
what does it feel like to chop a chicken's head off? And another one was, he was touching a mannequin's butt. Like,
Uh-huh.
what does that feel like to touch the butt of a man? So there's little silly things like that.
Yeah.
But what happened was that clients left me alone, and they said, "You're like," because my ideas are so intrinsically attached to my work
Mhm.
that they would just kind of give me free form control over what I wanted to do. And one of the biggest jobs I remember at the time was, 3 double page spreads for Entertainment Weekly. And so it was the year-end issue, it was the biggest issue that they do, and, it was kind of like the highlights of the year. All the people in Hollywood that won the big Oscars, that won the big movies, and so one of the spreads was for the Entertainer of the Year, and at the time, I think it was Peter Jackson, who had just completed the Lord of the Rings
Right.
trilogy.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, instead of drawing him or trolls and hobbits or whatever's in the series, I did a painting, actually, do you want me to quickly show you?
Sure. Yeah.
Uh, it's right here. I did this instead.
Uh-huh.
I thought it would be funnier. This was a double page spread in the magazine, so I thought it'd be funnier to show, a cupcake giving a monkey a daisy. Because my thinking was, and I'm still motivated by this, if I'm gonna do an assignment, if I'm gonna do a picture, what is an image that no other artist would do?
I
And
think
that's what right?
so I'm pretty sure I've seen that picture before. I don't know if it's just from the web or I don't think I saw that particular issue of Entertainment Weekly, but I'm not sure. So were you getting all that work like through like were you working through an agency or did you just become known and people just started coming to you because they knew your work?
It was, pretty much direct. I did have a few
Mhm.
agents in the past,
Yeah.
and I have an attitude problem, so that didn't really work out too well.
What does that mean exactly?
It means that I had a hard time justifying giving somebody 25% of an
Oh,
assignment where I thought, "Well, I could just do this on my own."
got it.
And my sister helps me out. She doesn't take on any other artists, but she will be more interested in, like, really big projects,
Uh-huh.
and it just sort of felt better to kind of work with family and or just to do it on my own, like, smaller
Sure.
stuff.
So your sister is an agent for you on larger jobs and On smaller jobs, you can kind of manage on your own.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, you're lucky to have somebody like that because most people can't say that.
I'm very lucky, and I'll be the first to admit it. My sister Vandana has done things like, for example, there was an agency in Toronto that wanted to do a series of artist quarters, actual currency for the Royal Canadian Mint. And so I just kicked it over to my sister to handle, and she went to the meeting, phoned me after the meeting, and she's like, "Yeah, I told them you don't want to do a series of 6 artists. We want Gary to do the whole thing." And so she said,
Okay,
"So I got you to do the whole thing." And
nice.
and so she's really good at promotion and marketing.
Uh huh.
But it's also easier for somebody else to sell you than it is to sell yourself, right?
Sure.
So she's always been in my corner, and that was a really good project. So I'm literally on Canadian money.
That's pretty cool. I wish
Yeah.
America would do more of that. I mean, America does it with stamps. Every year there's a whole series of different stamps, and from a creative standpoint, I've always thought that's really cool. And I like that makes me understand stamp collectors because there's all these new editions, new artists, and new this, and whenever I get stamps because I still use them. I always wanna see what they have, and I don't just want a generic stamp. I'm like, "Oh, that one's really cool," and I especially like the ones that are a series of different designs in a collection. I don't know why we don't do it with money as well. It just seems like such a cool idea, and money typically is, kinda boring, especially American money. American money is remarkably ugly compared to, like, the rest of the world where there's, like, bright colors and all kinds of
Mhm.
cool stuff. Speaking of America and money and our boring, dollars, one of the things you've been doing for the last quite some time now, something that I have a particularly fond admiration for, is all the political stuff you've been doing around the what I would probably refer to as the horror of American politics of, the better part of the last decade. In fact, I have one of the Kamala hats with the heel coming down on the red hat. I should have worn it for this in honor of you, but I spaced it out. What was it in just all the bullshit that we're having to deal with in America and our politics that inspired you to say, I need to say something about this? And your stuff is so incredibly poignant and spot on like every freaking time.
It started in 2016,
Hmm.
during his first administration.
Right.
It was just a way of, like, trying to have some semblance of, like, personal sanity, and these pictures just kinda came out as a means to do that. I never considered myself, a political artist. I have friends who are, like, comfortable with that moniker and do protest art and stuff like that. But I just started doing it as personal work, and it kind of caught on and got me into some really nice shows at a Shepherd Ferry studio. He had Subliminal Projects,
Yep.
his gallery. He had some cool shows and some book projects, as well as continuing on with upcoming shows about protest art. And then I started responding to just other social injustices. Like one of the last time I think I entered an award show was a piece I did about the Charlottesville attack. It was an image I did with the U.S. flag about white supremacy, and that got me a lot of press. It got me a gold medal at the Society of Illustrators.
Wow.
Yeah, and a bunch of my work during his first administration was acquired by the Library of Congress
Really?
for their permanent collection. It's been received really well.
Hmm.
It's kind of expanded my audience. The funny thing is that I could go on the internet and say something and nobody cares. But if I draw a picture, all of a sudden there's gravitas to it, and then people just lose their shit
In both directions, I assume.
in both
Uh huh.
directions.
Yep.
And so I'll get messages from people. On one hand, they'll say, "Your work is helping me get through some difficult times. I look forward to seeing what you come up with next. Like, thank you for being a voice." Other times, I'll get messages from MAGA supporters like, "Who do you think you are? You're not even American. You're Canadian. You're an Indian and a Canadian, right?"
Right.
Oh, that's getting a little bit racist there.
Everything about them is racist. I mean, come on. It's their
But
brand.
it's their brand. But I do love it though when a MAGA person says, "I've been buying your prints for years. I have tattoos of your work on my body. I have your books and stuff. I'm shocked at your politics." And I
Really?
love that. Yeah. It's like, well, you got to live with me now if I'm on your skin. Literally live with me.
Yeah, I don't know. I try to moderate the time I spend on social media because I think it can be such a toxic place and such a just such a waste of time and energy ultimately, you know. But I'm on there every day, and in particular I'm on Threads a bit. And I saw some comment the other day that some guy said something about, like, I can't remember the exact comment, but it was something about the Oscars, like, why do the Oscars have to be so political? And I'm kind of going, have you been paying attention to, like, what is going on? And by the way, have you watched any documentaries? And by the way, as far as I'm concerned, and this is, I think, where the discussion kind of diverges and people agree or disagree, is that, you know, art, to me anyway, is inherently political. Whether you as an artist want to go down that route, that's a personal choice. But art has always been political, and art has always been a place where political dissent comes from. Otherwise, why do authoritarians always try to kill the arts? It's one of the very first moves, and every single authoritarian regime is, you know, shut down the writers, shut down the artists, you know, put restrictions on films. You know, I mean,
Hmm.
you look at Jafar. I'm going to say his name wrong. Jafar Panahi, you know, from Iran. Like, he literally went to jail for making a film, and, you
Yeah.
know, his last couple of films he's had to basically export out of the country. And you know, and even now Trump is trying to say, we're going to take your broadcast licenses away because we
Yeah.
don't like what you're saying. And so I think what you're doing is great. And I'm glad you're doing it. Have you ever had any of these MAGA people that have made you feel uncomfortable or unsafe?
Yes. One guy, I did a piece right after Charlie Kirk was shot, and I took his name Kirk and I sort of configured it to Klansman because of the angle of the K. It just sort of graphically made sense. I wasn't saying the picture wasn't saying Charlie Kirk was a KKK, but the picture was certainly saying the KKK support him. Uh, Anyhow, that got me like one message. Some guy was like, "Just you and I. Let's have at it. I want to fight you. Come down to where I live." So he literally wanted to like physically hit me, and he was that outraged. I mean, I just ignore it because I mean, you know, people could be really like crazy. Then on the other side, too, amazing things will happen. Like for example, we were talking earlier about the Kamala stuff. I did a
Uh,
bunch of pictures about that, and that I was selling as like T-shirts and prints,
yeah.
and then I couldn't give any money to her campaign because it's against the law because I'm Canadian.
Oh, okay.
So it's yeah, so I mean that no candidate can accept foreign funds, right, for
Right.
campaigning. That's like a big no-no.
Meanwhile, American corporations are people, so they can give unlimited amounts
That's
of dark
right.
money. Go
Terrible.
figure.
So what I did instead was I donated a bunch of money to Planned Parenthood
Mhm.
in Canada because that was one of her big causes. So
Right.
I thought, well, I'm going to support what she supports. And so I did it under the name of supporting her campaign in that way. So nothing could be sort of directed to her,
Right. Right.
you know, to keep things kind of, you know, I'm just a Canadian who's inspired by her campaign. And by the way, I'll say till I'm blue in the face until I see otherwise.
Uh-huh.
I think she won that election.
Oh, you know what? I'll join you in the big pool
She,
of blue. I
yeah.
agree with you entirely. There is no way that she was breaking every attendance record for either party. There's no way she was breaking every fundraising record for either party. Meanwhile, Trump was having to downsize all of his rallies because the attendance was so poor. And I've seen enough videos of him doing a nudge, nudge, wink, wink on stage with Elon, kind of going in front of a crowd of people. Should we tell him what we did? We can't tell him what we did. And Elon going, if they knew what I did, I'd be in prison. I've had this argument also on Threads. You know, he is illegitimately in the White House. They stole this election, and it's always the same thing. It's like, oh, so I thought that elections weren't, you couldn't steal it. When our guy said, when Trump said the election was stolen and Biden got in, but now that he's in, I'm like, yeah, they can't be stolen until somebody figures out a way to successfully do it. And
Exactly,
I
man.
think they did, and I think what you're seeing now is, a bunch of people in power and a bunch of tech bros with a lot of money who successfully got him in and kept him out of prison. And now he's ultimately really only running so much of what's going on in the country. And I think basically he's doing the bidding of a lot of people who kept him out of prison.
I agree with you. Yeah.
And people can argue all they want. And you know what? For any people on the right who are watching this podcast, and I'll be amazed if you're out there, comment all you want in the comments below. Have at it. I would love to argue with you. If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. Do you think once Trump is finally out of office, once MAGA has deteriorated enough to where there won't be such a force in American life and American politics, do you feel like the political nature of your more recent art will die down with that? Or do you feel like you've been impacted in a way to where you'll kind of be more likely to comment on sort of social injustice and that sort of thing?
That's a really great question. I hope I don't have to draw this stuff anymore. There are also times too where it stresses me out and it just, I've had sleepless nights. I mean, I chase my ideas and I draw them and I put them out there, and I would prefer not to. I would prefer if we lived in a world that was safe and peaceful. That Obama was a really nice man, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he did some bombing stuff that I disagreed with wholeheartedly, but
Right.
broadly speaking, he was a great president
Yeah.
and he gave a shit. I think that's really what it comes down to is like, even if you're a Republican, do you actually care about certain things? Do you actually have certain idealistic convictions or not? Like, I think Donald Trump is somebody with zero convictions about anything. I think he just wants whatever's going to benefit him and his family. And I think he gets off on cruelty. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of it. Well, I hope we reach that point and then you can have fewer sleepless nights. I believe we're going to get there, but it's hard not to worry about that. So it's interesting. So I'm in America, you're in Canada. Americans have such a terrible sense of anything that goes on politically outside of America. What is it like being in Canada and experiencing American politics? Can you live a life in Canada and sort of be oblivious to American politics?
No, just like we can't be oblivious to anything that's happening in your country.
Right.
Martin Short was asked once why Canadians are so funny. And
Uh-huh.
he said it's because we grew up watching Canadian television and American television.
Uh-huh.
Every single Canadian watches what goes on in your country.
Right.
It's front and center. It's a big part of our lives. But we're also outsiders, so we watch things from a little bit of a different perspective, right? Because we're looking at from from another place at something, and because of that, certain things. I think it was Noam Chomsky who said that he was in a documentary called Manufacturing
Yep.
Consent.
Yep. No,
And he
well,
said, because that would never be shown in America, but the CBC aired it here in Canada. He goes, you could show a documentary like that in Canada, but at the same time, uh, you could show it also knowing that nothing will happen. So
hmm,
Canadians, there is a bit of a benign passivity to us in the way we are as a society.
uh-huh.
I mean, obviously, we have our share of MAGA too, but, like, Canadians aren't as confrontational as
Right.
Americans are.
Right.
It's kind of like in your DNA somehow, right? And it's not in our DNA, it's like the opposite.
Combative.
Yes.
Yeah. Another one of my Canadian liberal progressive heroes is, do you know Naomi Klein?
Yes. Yeah, she's great.
She's phenomenal. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's one of my big
Yeah.
political crushes.
Yeah.
So hey Naomi, if you happen to see this, if you ever want to be on the podcast, You're
Yeah.
welcome. I'd love to have you. I lived in Seattle for 22 years, and so we were close to the border of Vancouver,
Mhm.
and I spent a lot of time up there. And it was not uncommon for me to wonder if I was living in the wrong country because there was a whole sensibility. And, in America, there's this whole stereotype of, Canadians are just nicer. And I actually think I think for the most part, that's true. I think that there is much more of a kindness. And I think maybe you touched on it when the combativeness of sort of the macho American, which is so encapsulated in ultimately in what is the frailty of MAGA, that
Mhm.
always baffles me is like they're so, "Roar," and yet they're the first ones to play the victim at every freaking turn about every little thing. I don't understand it. I also don't understand this party that is in power and their inclination towards destroying well-being in life and to be cruel to, underserved populations. From a political standpoint, it just seems like the purpose of government should be to help your society, to make your society a better place for all people in it. We're totally going off tangent, but
Yeah.
that's because art is, as I was saying, in my belief, inherently political. So let's get back to you. Let's get back to your art, above and beyond and outside of the stuff that you're doing that is so politically astute these days. What other kind of work have you been doing that is, say, non-political?
There's a lot that's happening now. I'm working on a bunch of personal work for a European publication called Avant Garde. It's like an art and fashion magazine.
Okay.
And so I'm working towards that. There's a really nice gallery in Los Angeles called Corey Helford.
Yep, I know them well.
Yeah, they're having a show next week, in a week or 2, and I have, a small painting in that show. I'll be working, on a two-person show with my friend Niagara Detroit. She's, a artist in Michigan, and we're gonna be showing at a gallery in New Orleans called Mortal Machine Gallery in the spring of next year, and in 2 years, I have a solo show at a gallery here, at a municipal gallery. It's like a museum, and I'll be doing a massive exhibition. Then there's commissions, editorial stuff here and there. I work for a wine publication called Noble Rot. I just did something for them. I'm working on posters and graphics for a Broadway play.
Wow.
I can't talk too much about
Okay.
because hopefully it'll be out this year, but that's been super fun. Commissions as well. Sometimes my collectors will commission me to do some work, and so, yeah, there's always something going on.
That's great. That's fantastic. I mean, you're one of the lucky ones, and not saying you don't deserve it, just saying that, there's so many artists who struggle their whole lives. And, whenever I see an artist who is doing their art as their means of existence, I'm always beyond delighted for them because it's a hard thing to do, and especially if you're in America. I think
Yeah.
it's much harder here. What would you say to young artists who are driven to create and who are maybe frustrated or having a difficult time seeing a future doing their creative thing, because I mean, this podcast is sort of about like, how do people live lives that are inherently creative? Because I feel like most creative people spend a lot of their life in disappointment or wishing they would have done the thing that they didn't ultimately pursue. So I guess I would ask you, what would you say to people to encourage them to maybe just go for it?
Well, the first thing is that, to even be creative and to have an outlet is in itself a beautiful thing because a lot of people don't even have that. I
Mhm.
have friends who are successful lawyers and doctors and surgeons and people who do well, but they don't love their jobs.
Right. Yes.
And and obviously one needs to survive in this world, but having creativity at least feeds your soul, so
Mhm.
you can at least kind of appease your sense of belonging as a human being in this universe by having something to say and getting lost in your creativity. And that entire process is something no human being, no entity, no company, no government, whatever the case may be, can take away from you. That said, I think it's important to be able to pivot, and learn how to navigate in this world by trying different things. Like, for example, if you make art, instead of just focusing, let's say, on galleries, focus on maybe, multiple things. Like, maybe you are doing some zines, maybe you're promoting yourself to some agencies, maybe you're setting up shows with other artists to do a group show,
Mhm.
maybe you're printing off stickers, maybe you're volunteering and doing charity stuff. And that is another thing that gives you a sense of purpose. I always try to have something going where I'm donating to a charity, or a cause to, give myself a bit of purpose and happiness about giving back to the world. Every artist has a different marketing plan. Every artist has their own client base and uh, collector base and things like that. So there's no surefire way. All I could say is that if you can also maybe teach, I teach as well.
Yeah.
And that is something that can supplement an income if you need it. It can, give you a roof over your head and help you survive while you are doing creative projects. Even like teaching, like, mentoring emerging artists uh, as well. Maybe just putting up some flyers and being like, I'll teach some kids how to like mix paint and stuff on the weekends and anything at all to like just sort of stay active.
Mhm.
And it is good. Entering contests, just being present in it and constantly working towards something can like lead to stuff. I wish I had a better answer where I could give it like a surefire way where somebody can survive, because I think all artists should be allowed to survive and to be encouraged to create their work and have stability. And sadly, they don't.
Well, there's also that whole sense of like you're either an artist or you're not. And I think sometimes societally we measure everything by financial success, you know. So I think people who are maybe artists but do this other career thing to make money feel like, "Oh, I'm not an artist," so they stop doing the art. I think maybe it's important to remember that you can do your art and maybe do something else for money. It doesn't mean you're not an artist.
Exactly. One of my favorite artists, Bill Traylor, he was born into slavery. He was 12 years old when it was abolished, and he didn't start making art until he was in his early 80s. And
Wow.
now he's in the Whitney, the Museum of Modern Art, and he's considered one of like the top American folk artists. Van Gogh did all that stuff in 10 years.
Right.
Thousands of drawings and paintings, and there's no timeline. I mean, obviously, like Van Gogh didn't have a successful career. I think he only sold one painting, and he died pretty much penniless and sad.
Right.
But at the same time, creativity, there is no rule for it, and um, yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com. And our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.